All right, welcome to Discover Your Inner Guru Week 6. I can't believe it's week 6 already. So there you go. I am always amazed at how quickly time flies, and I've been really, really touched through this whole process and seeing you guys grow. And it's been really fun to really hone in on this process. And I'm glad that we did a second beta test round because I needed it. So thank you guys for your patience and for your feedback. Hi, Cindy. Welcome. All right. So before we begin, I just want to again thank you all for your participation. And it's been an awesome 6 weeks. And remember that you always have access to the videos and the homework. You can just log in. And as far as I know, forevermore, you can go in there and access it forever. So let me know if you ever have a problem, and I'll try to figure it out. Um, just keep yourselves muted again, unless you have a question. Feel free to use the chat for any comments or questions, and I'll do my best to check it. And then remember, our Q&A is Friday night at 7 o'clock. So those Q&As have been really great, you guys. I know it's just the last week, but please try to make it for this last one because anyway, I just feel like a lot of really good conversations have happened. Have you felt like, Melissa, like the last one I felt was just really cool? So that's where I feel like the real good, really goody stuff happens. You don't hear me. I mean, I do talk a lot still, but you guys get more of a chance to talk and share and really um, lock in what you're learning. Okay. Um, so I've already kind of mentioned why I've been doing this. You know, Guru's been in the works for a long time, and I was actually pondering this morning about like how long has Guru been in the works, really? And I started having these flashbacks and memories of all those years I was teaching voice lessons. I don't know if you guys, some of you know that, but I'm a professionally trained singer, and because I was so sick for so many years, I resorted to teaching lessons instead of performing on stage because it was just too hard to maintain, to have the stamina and to stay on my game in the performing aspects. And so I was having these flashbacks to teaching voice lessons and particular students that will always have an imprint on my heart. And I always found myself teaching things other than voice technique and always finding ways to get to the root of what was really going on with them. And it was always emotional. It was always something about their mindset that was making their body lock up. And it really wasn't about the breath. It wasn't about beautiful tone. It wasn't about the vowel. It really wasn't about any of that. It was about their insecurities. It was about, um, whatever it was usually emotional and usually connected to their mindset. And so I began searching for ways to reach these kids, and and also just kind of applying what I was learning in my healing journey, because I was also learning for myself that all most of my health issues were either related to how I was fueling my body or trauma, PTSD from childhood, or just how I didn't really know how to manage emotions. And so as I was learning, I would then go and apply that to my kids, and they were my guinea pigs too. But it's really been in the works for many years, and it's so interesting to me how it's finally coming out. Like it's finally the timing of me creating the course and making it official to me is so timely and so divinely inspired because of what's going on in the world. And it's a crazy, mad world, right? And it's going to get worse. The scriptures teach us that the righteous will get more righteous and the wicked will get more wicked. I'm not going to go into a gospel discussion here, but like we're starting to see that there's so much good in the world and it's getting better and better. And then the yucky parts are getting worse and worse. And there's just so much turmoil between the coronavirus and the children starving in Kenya. I don't know if you guys are aware of everything that's going on in Africa right now, between all the locusts and the famine and the coronavirus restrictions. More people are dying from starvation right now because of the coronavirus restrictions than the actual coronavirus. And so, and the sex trafficking, I mean, the list could go on and on and on. Black Lives Matter, whatever I mean, there's so much, right? And it's only going to keep happening. And I feel like one of the main things that is really lacking in this world is an ability to really manage our emotions, right? To develop emotional intelligence and to learn what it means to find peace and clarity and truth in the midst of all the chaos. And so I really believe with all my heart that this course, and I'm not really trying to put myself on a pedestal, because I really feel like this was inspired and it's not me. I'm just trying to be the voice. I really believe it can change the world, and I would really love your guys' help in getting the word out there as things develop. And I'm trying my best to make sure that it's always really affordable and accessible to everybody and anyone. Um, but I feel really strongly about it, and I just want everyone to have a piece of it, and to even just to learn the most basics of what I've been teaching you guys. So I want to just really quickly and do a review. Welcome to everyone who's just barely joined us. Glad you're here. Hi, Diana. Well, Diana, giving you a big virtual hug right now. You've been through a lot the last several weeks. I'm glad that you're here. Okay. All right, so week one, we talked about, we did the reboot, reset, and renew, right? And then week two, we talked about loving what is and observing, um, without that shame or judgment. And I don't know if you guys saw the quote that I posted on my timeline and on the Guru site recently that said, by Dr. Rebecca Ray, sit with it, sit with it, sit with it, sit with it. Even though you want to run, even when it's heavy and difficult, even when you're not quite sure of the way through, healing happens by feeling. And so we talked a lot about this concept that loving what is really being okay with the discomfort and really sitting with it and allowing the energy to move, and how counterintuitive that is to our human self, right? And how awkward that can feel, and what a concept. I remember the first time I was introduced to this concept of leaning in, relaxing into it, was so foreign to me, because I was in total fight or flight all the time and choosing suffering, unconsciously choosing suffering. And so I feel like it took me a while to really, like, get it and grasp it, and it just to get my body programmed to to remember that, and even just to remember to breathe, right? How often do we hold our breath? And so we talked about that, sitting with it and feeling it as part of loving what is, um, seeing things as they really are, what feels real versus what's actually true, right? And then we talked about the shame and the judgment aspect of it and how that comes in. Brene Brown says that, I love this quote that I just actually recently came across that I'd never heard before. She says, shame needs three things to grow exponentially in our lives: secrecy, silence, and judgment. And I found that really interesting, because we've talked about transparency, right? And then we talked about how suppressing, can really be harmful, and we need to let things move. And then that judgment aspect of it, where we have to make sense of everything. Our human self's like, well, why? Like the incessant child is like, why, mom? Why? We say the same thing, and we want to make sense of everything, because it's like our need to control, our fear of what's out of control, our fear of the unknown. We have to go into that space of trying to make sense of it so we can feel okay and give ourselves I believe, a false sense of security, because there's so much that we don't have control over, right? Um, let's see. And we're going to talk a little bit more about the transparency aspect of this, because I feel like it's such an important key. But remembering, some of you that took my last beta test, I quoted Byron Katie's in reference to truth. And she said, "I'm a lover of what is, not because I'm a spiritual person, but because it hurts when I argue with reality." What I find really interesting, though, is that our MO usually is to be in that fight place, is to be in that struggle place, and trying to like resist what's true because there's so much shame around it, right? But it's a really heavy place, and it saps a lot of our energy. And so the more that we can release that shame and judgment and acknowledge it, at the very least love on it, and then let it move, then our ability to see what's really true expands exponentially. And then week 3, we talked about awareness and discernment, and this is really important. You know, awareness is the master key. It was so cool. The other day, my husband was having a moment where he was sharing with me, and I'm not going to share all the things because I don't have his permission, but he's like, "I'm really starting to realize that the awareness is the key for me." And I was like, you know, like inside I'm going, yeah, 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 like you're getting it, you know? And it's like if we can just be aware, but awareness isn't just about watching what's going on, because if we're just in awareness of like from our current perceptions, we're not really seeing things as they are. But taking awareness to that level of discernment, right? And being able to distinguish between what's real versus what's true, being able to connect with whether it's yours or whether you empathed it, or whether it might be a generational pattern that you never really chose, but you somehow are carrying with you. Being able to discern whether you're in the present moment or whether you're focusing in the past or the future, right? So those are kind of some of the key discernments that you can take your awareness to that next level. And then we talked about the law of the harvest and how it takes time for us to create new neural pathways in the brain. And it's important that we're patient with those 6 days of creation within us, right? Remember how I talked about the 6 days of creation, and how you know, on the emotional and spiritual level, some of us might be at a level 1 or 2, and others might be at level 5 or 6. And we need to respect the level that we're at and not try to skip a level. We get to kind of develop, just like a child has to go through each stage of development. And you know, I've noticed myself and so many clients throughout the years that sometimes if they've tried to skip that stage of development, it's almost like their brain is frozen in time with that thing. And suddenly, you know, they're behaving like a 13-year-old because there's a 13-year-old part of themselves that hadn't healed or moved on from something, you know. And it's so fascinating. It's like, well, there's a reason why your husband's acting like a 13-year-old. That's because his 13-year-old is still sitting in a lot of pain. So let's look at that and let's see if we can shift that. And then we talked about the power of full transparency, this ability to look yourself in the mirror fully naked, I mean, real or metaphorically, and just see it for what it is without the shame or judgment. And that, I think, is the most difficult thing to do, because so many of us in our culture, we're so deeply programmed to judge everything. You know, society tells us what we should look like. You know, society tells us how we should think, and our parents tell us how we should think and believe. And there's all these voices, and there's the adversary. He's always in our head, wreaking havoc and telling us things that aren't even remotely true about ourselves. And then we just get it gets muddled and it gets confusing. And it's like we're taught, don't look at what's real, because what's real is bad. It's not good, you know. And if you let people see you as you really are, it's one of the biggest tools that Satan uses with people with addiction. It's like pornography, for example. That's one of the biggest lies that as you're talking to these addicts, they'll say, well, I believed that I could figure it out on my own, and no one had to ever know, that I wasn't hurting anyone else but myself. But if anyone ever knew this, I would never be lovable, you know, like I'm not worthy of love. And so, like, I can't reveal that. And so, stepping into full transparency, and I feel like this is one of the biggest keys that when you find yourself hitting a brick wall, you either haven't fully stepped into love, which is what we're coming around to for today. Um, you haven't been able to really fully come into enough love so that you can really see things as they really are and be fully honest with yourself and take full responsibility for your bit, right? For really, really owning how you're showing up. I actually went through the process that I taught you guys last week, yesterday, because I have been feeling a little bit haunted in my observations with this thing called distraction. And lately it's come to my attention in my observations that distraction is probably one of the biggest things that is holding me back from really accomplishing what I want to do and moving forward with my vision. And so I went through the process, and it took me a while. It took me at least an hour or so to go through this process. And when I got to the part where I needed to be really honest with myself, like, how am I showing up here? Like how am I contributing to this? That was where I felt the biggest shift in my thinking and in my whole being, was when I was able to say, well, the truth of the matter is I'm not really setting strong enough commitments with myself, and that's why I'm not following through on the commitments I'm making to either wake up at a certain time in the morning or to get certain things done by a certain date. And you know, I've been in a lot of blame about how I'm interrupted all the time by my kids, or the barking dog waking up my baby from a nap, or my notifications on my phone, or, you know, there were all these things that I was kind of in blame and victimhood with, but really stepping in and totally owning, like, well, you're not getting up, you're not honoring your commitments, you're not, and just owning it. It was almost like this huge relief and weight lifted off my shoulders when I was able to do that. And my husband I was kind of talking through this with him recently, and he said, you know, one of the things that I've learned from bishops, you know, ecclesiastical leaders throughout the years, is if you can just come into my office, and the more honest you are with me, the more free you will feel. And that's the truth. You know, what's the scripture? That ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. And that's in John 8:32. And it's really true. But our human self and the adversary will tell us that there's too much shame, there's too much judgment involved, and it's just too painful, and it's just not worth it. And so then you stay in bondage until you're ready to really to own it. And that leads us to vulnerability. We talked about how that transparency can create a really profound vulnerability within us, right? And I apologize for some of you if you feel like I'm repeating myself. I'm doing this on purpose because repetition is really important. So if you're getting bored, it's okay. Hang in there with me. Vulnerability, remember we talked about how that is power. If you can really allow yourself to lean into vulnerability and really allow yourself to just sit in the discomfort, like we mentioned before, there's magic in that. It's kind of a superpower place. You know, if you really want to tap into massive power, allow yourself to really embrace vulnerability. And from a faith standpoint, I believe that space of vulnerability really allows me to really tap into God's power on a whole new level, because I am fully submissive and humble and willing to do what, you know, His will. And there's so much power in that. But on just a secular level, that vulnerability really opens us up to the possibilities. And I love what Brene Brown says, where she says that vulnerability is the birthplace of innovation, creativity, and change. Think about that for a minute. Vulnerability is the birthplace of innovation, creativity, and change. Now, if you're a man, you don't know what it's like to be birthing a child. And some of you maybe haven't had children, so you don't know what that feels like. But when you're in labor, it really feels like, in fact, I was faced with this recently when I was able to attend a birth a couple weeks ago. And it was so fascinating to not be the mom, but to be right there with her as her doula, and feeling literally like that mother was facing the very gates of hell and heaven at the same time. You know, like the most beautiful, powerful, creative, transformational thing was happening. And and yet she was in hell. She was in the most unimaginable, excruciating pain all at the same time. And so it's totally possible to be in complete vulnerability, but be able to access the most, all the power of creation, the power of possibility, the power of change is right there at your fingertips when you're willing to really do that and sit with that. Someone's been, Kirsten, you're cute. I'm reading the chat for just a second. Yes, Valerie, we missed you, and we're just glad you're here now. Oh, you're noticing how vulnerable your oldest daughter is when she's creating music. Yeah, it's really true. In fact, some of the best songs have come from heartache, right? Have come from just really digging deep and expressing that raw emotion. Those are the songs that we really, I think, stand the test of time because they're so connected to that vulnerability and that emotion. Thank you for sharing that. So as you've been progressing throughout the weeks, as you've been learning all these different things, and then last week we talked about taking the skill of observation into a broader and deeper scope in order to help you begin the process of healing programming, unhealthy programming, whether it be in your thoughts, your belief patterns, or whether it be in your actions, your health, your whatever, like results, because your results in your body or in your life, like finances or your relationships or whatever, are usually just kind of evidence or the fruits of those patterns, right, from years ago. So it's really important to actually take some time to look at the broad view instead of just those moment by moments are really important, because it's in those moments when you're dealing with the trigger in the moment and you're observing it and you're making a conscious choice, you're loving on it, all of those things. That's how you bit by bit, line upon line, precept upon precept, change those neural pathways over the long run. But sometimes you need to kind of look back and look at the whole picture out of those individual moments and see, okay, what is showing up in my life and what don't I want anymore? You know what I mean? Like, what am I not appreciating about my life? Like, what results do I not like in my life right now? And what do I want to see change? And until you can kind of look at how you got there and be really fully honest with yourself and really connect to what's true about all of it, you really won't be able to get out of the hamster wheel with that pattern. And so I gave you guys a really great process to help begin the process of changing your brain. And I went and did some more research because I know that the science is always changing. They used to say that it takes 21 days for a new neural pathway to form in the brain, and then 90 days for it to become a primary pathway. Now they're saying that it's like 66 days to create a new neural pathway in the brain, but that there's like a scope of anywhere from 18 to 254 days or something like that. And so depending upon the person, depending on what it is you're trying to reprogram, like if it's really deep trauma that has been reinforced over time, like those kind of things might take a little bit more time. I remember learning from a doctor, I don't know, I was probably 19 or 20, and I was researching eating and trying to fuel my body differently because I was just so sick. And I was learning about alkaline versus acidity. in the body, and how this doctor, his name is Dr. Alex Guerrero, and he did this study on how if you can bring, he worked with cancer patients, and he helped many, many, many cancer patients who should have passed away from cancer completely heal their body just through fueling the body properly and getting the body to an alkaline state, and no longer feeding the body the toxic, the sugars and the yeast and the funguses that actually feed the cancer. And so I remember him saying that for every year that you're sick, that you've been sick, it takes at least a month to heal your body. And so I was really solidly sick for a good 23 years, and so 23 months, I kind of had in my head that I would need a couple of years to really heal my gut, to really change things around. And it really has taken that much time, and I'm still on my journey to getting where I want to be, but to really clear and cleanse that autoimmune from my system. And so just keep that in mind, and be patient with the time that it takes. So whether you've realized it or not, there was a common theme that was threaded throughout all these last 5 weeks. Everything I've taught you, every exercise I've given you, was just another way to teach you how to return to love. Love is the answer, you guys. It's the first and second commandments. Love, thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart and with all thy soul and with all thy mind. And the second is like unto it, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. Love is the key. Everything that I've taught you is finding a way to return to love. The need to love and be loved is the most common thread among all of mankind. All humans share that same need to love and be loved. And I believe that it's a need in order to survive. I don't know if any of you have heard the story of the orphanages in Romania. Has anyone ever heard those, where the babies in the cribs literally died? They were getting food and water, but they weren't being held. They weren't being they were emotionally being neglected, and so they just failed to thrive. And they died. Kirsten, did you want to say something?
Yes, I actually
I can't
last
hear
year was
you.
right. Can you hear me now? Oh, sorry.
But chat, will you want to put it in the chat? Okay. Um, and so I believe, like, to me, that's evidence that, maybe they could have done without food or water a little bit more, but the love aspect, the food and water didn't keep them alive alone. And so, just like we need food and water and rest, we also need love. And it's not just sort of one of those cliche things, all we need is love. It's true. We do. It's an inherent need that we all have to be loved. And I feel like, as a believer, if you are a believer, it was the greatest act of love that ever happened was they saved all of mankind, right? It was the atonement of Jesus Christ, and made it possible for us all to continue creating and progressing and becoming like him. Sorry, Kirsten, I'm going to look. Oh, the title of Brene Brown's book. I'm not sure which one that quote comes from, but I will see if I can figure that out. Kirsten, did you still want to comment? No? Okay. So love is the secret sauce. Returning to love will truly make all the difference in your efforts to release unhealthy programming. And if you're not in a space of love, I just believe you're not going to shift. You just won't shift. You'll remain stagnant. And that's what, the scriptures talk about, damnation. That's all that is. It's just a lack of movement It's a lack of progression. And so if you want movement, if you want progress, returning to love is really the bottom line. And that's everything that we've been doing through the past 6 weeks. And it's interesting because love comes in many forms, doesn't it? It's not always in that really sweet, tender, patient, long-suffering way. Sometimes it comes with honesty, right? Sometimes it's setting a clear boundary and saying no. Sometimes it's, you know, maybe stepping back from certain people, you know? It doesn't always look like saying the right thing in love and truth, you know? It's like sometimes it's clearing the temple. Like when Christ had to clear the temple, love takes on many forms. Sometimes it's direct and blunt and hard to take because of that honesty and transparency with the shame that might be connected to it. And sometimes it's full on compassion and empathy where you can really put yourself in someone else's shoes and feel what they're feeling. And sometimes it's holding space for the ugly, right? It's sitting with the ugly feelings that you're feeling and thoughts and beliefs and all of that, and letting them be seen, letting them be heard, and letting them be felt. And sometimes that's really vulnerable. So love can be really, really vulnerable, right? It's not all warm and fuzzy. So as you're doing the work, if you don't get around to any of the homework, if you can't get around to any of the exercises that I've given you, at the very least, on the most basic level, find a way to return to love. Connect to God's love if you believe in God. Remember to the love that you had for others, especially those who you're in trigger about. Find a way, or just take a moment to remember the last time you felt love for them. Remember the evidence that you have that you do love them, in fact, right? So if that's the only thing that you can focus on, that's the most important. Okay? And you might still have gut reactions. You might still have triggers. You might still have people show up for you in really toxic ways. You can't always control that. You know, sometimes crap happens. You know, life happens. And life is meant to be full of growth opportunities, I call them. And sometimes those growth opportunities hurt like heck. And they're painful and they're uncomfortable. And Kirsten is writing. Okay, I'm going to read what Kirsten says. I wrote a paper last year on children's need to have physical play and hugs and squishing from parents to thrive, a good sensory diet. Ooh, I love that. I came across those studies from the orphanage, and the kids that survived this neglect, their head circumference was super small, their ability to learn and emotional was super stunted. Teenage children looked like they were 7 and 8 years old. Even toddlers that were part of a rehabilitation project in the orphanage did not recover from the first few years of physical neglect in this study. I wish that they could have had the healing of Reiki. Yes, because that's what Reiki is all about, right? The frequency of love. But yeah, thank you for sharing, Kirsten. Love is so vital for thriving. So you will inevitably find yourself in situations where you're totally out of control, right? You're going to find yourself in the messy. You're going to find yourself in your not your best self. Your ugly self is going to show itself, and the shame and judgment's going to try to come in, and these things will just happen. It will be a lifelong journey, observing, learning from these things, and making a conscious choice. But ultimately, what the ultimate goal is to find a connection to love. And what's so great is, even though there's so much that we don't have control over, you always have a choice about how you respond. You always have a choice about how you choose to believe about yourself and about the world and what it means about you and about the world. You choose your beliefs, you choose your response, and the peace that you seek is yours for the receiving. And it's not up to anyone else to give it to you, to make it happen for you. It's on you. And it's all in that choice and your willingness to do the work and your willingness to connect to love. And truly sometimes that means you have to humble yourself and admit that you were wrong, you know, and allow that, what I call godly sorrow, to exist in your heart for a moment and let that grieving space happen. I'd like to actually kind of be vulnerable with you guys for a bit and share a personal story, which is fairly recent actually. About 3 years ago, and this is again not meant to be a discussion on religion or anything like that, but to illustrate the topic of connecting back to love. So I had what you can call a faith crisis, I suppose. And, I grew up in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. My situation was really unique in the fact that I did not grow up in just any average home of this faith. It was kind of, I would say, a cult-like environment. The girls had to wear dresses and couldn't wear makeup or pierce their ears. And we lived off the land, and we were kind of Amish a little bit, but there was a lot of control and a lot of sort of forcing us to heaven kind of energy. And so it's really kind of interesting that I had stayed all these years in the faith that I am participating in because of how I grew up, because it was very toxic and twisted and yucky. And as a very young child, being one of 13 kids and being the only girl for 10 years. My next sister was 10 years older than me. I lived a very lonely, solitary childhood, even though there was a lot of people in the house. And that really allowed me to connect to God, because he was really the only one I could talk to. And so in some ways that was really my saving grace. But I had this crisis, and there were some things about my faith that I had realized that I'd never questioned. And there were some incidences that happened that sent me into full-on childhood trauma brain. I went to certain ceremonies, and I'm trying to be discreet, and would find myself sitting in there in a space that was supposed to be full of light, full of love, and the safest place from the world, in full-on childhood trauma brain panic, wanting to get the heck out of there. And I didn't understand. And so some of these things started happening, and then people at church started showing up a certain way, and I started seeing kind of some really yucky cultural stuff that had infiltrated. Long story short, if I'm even capable of that, I had this crisis, and I suddenly was feeling so much resentment and so much anger and so much confusion about what in the world, like, I've been a part of this church for so long, and like how much of it is really true. And at 38, 39 years old, I was for the first time really questioning in a way that a lot of my friends and family have, and it resulted in them totally leaving. And so I remember going to God one day and saying, okay, this is kind of a big deal. If I were to leave, it would break my husband's heart. It would totally crush and devastate him. It could potentially break my whole family apart. I mean, it was kind of a big deal. And these are the words that he told me. There were two things that God taught me. And I want you to remember these two things, because I feel like it applies anytime we're in trigger, anytime we're really questioning and not knowing how to act or move forward, or anytime we're wanting to act in trigger. Please remember this. So these are the two things. He said, number one, don't make any decisions until you have fully connected to love. And number two was, connect to the evidence that you already have of what is true. And I'm not going to share the rest of the story because some of the things are just really sacred. But the bottom line is, I gave myself a year to just really learn what it meant to connect to love for myself, to connect to God's love, to connect to loving what is, to loving my shadow self, which I still feel like I'm I'm on a journey with that. There's still things that come up for me that I really don't love about myself. Kirsten, number one was um, don't make any decisions or take action unless you've fully connected to love. So, in other words, don't act in anger, don't act out in fear, like don't make any decisions in that space of anger or fear or resentment. Wait until you've really connected to love and make that choice from that space. And number two was connect to the evidence of what you already know without a doubt is true, and use that as your foundation, basically. And that has carried through the past 3 years. I've been able to apply that counsel to so many different situations, situations where I've been triggered and I've wanted to confront, I tend to be a fighter, not a flighter. So when I get in an argument with someone, my natural instinct is to be like, like let's duke it out, and hopefully we're friends in the end. But I want to just put people in their place, my natural man. And so I've learned to just really let, on my own time, in my own space, let that energy move through me and really get to the root, look inside the mirror in full transparency of like what's in me that created that trigger, and deal with it, love on it, let it move, learn from it. Write the lessons down. And when I learn the lesson, it moves. And then suddenly I go to that person and there's no need for me to have confrontation. And I'm more prone to just love them and to just let it go because whatever, like I'm good, we're cool, right? And it's just an amazing, miraculous, beautiful thing. And I chose to stay. That's the end of my story. And actually that counsel has helped me really sort through and discern from what isn't true and what is true. And I've been able to kind of really find and build a deeper foundation of truth. And now I can actually go to church and not be super bugged and cringy all the time because of how sometimes people are showing up there. And things just don't faze me like they used to. And I'm not afraid to say no. And I'm not afraid to question the leaders and say, hey, in love, of course, hey, what's going on here? Why is this happening? And I'm not blindly following anymore. There's a lot of really cool things that came from that story, but the point is, when you're faced with hard things, when you're faced with intense emotions, when you're faced with these huge decisions, and these decisions will come up for you a lot when you're trying to reprogram your brain, because as you start to connect to what's really true and things start to kind of unfold for you, you're going to have these aha moments and you're going to start to see the full picture. And sometimes the full picture is not what you thought it was. And that can be devastating. It really, truly can be absolutely devastating. Like, whoa, this is not what I thought. And because the human part of us lives on those expectations and like a need to control everything, and we don't know how to just kind of roll with it and surrender, we're learning how, right? The more you can learn to surrender and connect to love, the more you can like let go of expectations of how things, or that judgment of how things should or shouldn't be. It's so much, it just simplifies life. You're no longer expending energy on things that don't matter or that you don't have control over. And suddenly you're honing in and you're really just refining how you're spending your energy. And the energy can go more towards like your intention of what you want to actually create, rather than the energy all being expended on, deflecting all the time and surviving and trying to control and trying to make things happen, rather than allowing things to unfold and allowing yourself to learn organically and breathe through it and just feel it. And you guys, I kind of went on a tangent there, but just this whole concept, the whole overarching theme, I just want to imprint upon your hearts, if I possibly can, that it's all about love. And so in any given moment, I would like you to ask yourself some questions. If you don't do any of the steps of observation, other than just taking a deep breath and asking yourself these questions in order to help you connect to love, this is what matters most. Here are some of those questions. Are my words or actions coming from a place of love or pain? So love or pain. And to me, pain is anger, hurt, resentment, fear, right? It's all of those things. So am I coming from a place of love, or am I coming from a place of pain? 2, are my motivations, and I'll have these on the site, so you don't necessarily have to write these down now because I'll have them up on the site. Are my motivations coming from a space of love or pain? So what's my why? What are my motivations? Like, am I trying to control here? Is my motivation to be right? Is my motivation because I have to be heard? And that doesn't mean that it's wrong that you want to be heard, but is my motivation because I'm truly in a space of love or not? Okay. What will it take for me to be able to truly love myself? What will it take for me to be able to truly love others? What is holding me back from love in this moment? And this is one of my favorites. What do I want? And you remember how I was telling you guys that for so many years, I couldn't even ask myself what I wanted, because do you want to know what one of my very core beliefs was about myself that was unveiled through this process? I am not a person. Because when you grow up in a house where you don't have any autonomy and you're told exactly what you have to wear, what you have to do every second, and if you don't, you're afraid of being beaten or chastised or ashamed, right? Or embarrassed or humiliated, then yeah, you learn that you don't have a voice. And for me, it was, I am not a person. And so to be able to actually go step into that freedom space of, what do I want? Do I want more pain? I don't know. Do I want joy? Do I want love? Like, what is it that I want right now? And so suddenly it's not even about them. It's about what you want, and it brings the focus into what you have control over in the here and now. What do I want? We have a little bit of time here for some questions, but I just want to close with these thoughts. That, again, I'm going to repeat myself a million times in this 1 hour, that love is the answer. It is always the answer. It comes in many forms. It takes practice. It takes time to learn what that looks like and how it gets to be expressed in its most truest, purest form in any given moment. It definitely is a labor of love, learning how to love. It's effort, it's learning, it's discipline, and it's consistency. Continually being willing to step out of the hamster wheel, out of unconscious reaction, into, wait a second, what do I want? I have a choice. Remember, Kara? Like, hey, yeah, I have a choice here. Cool. All right, what do I choose? I'm going to sit with it. I'm going to breathe. I'm going to calm down my parasympathetic nervous system. Suddenly, I'm in the driver's seat now. I'm the guru now. because I've learned that I have everything in me that I need to become what my potential is. I have connection to divine power any given moment and love to support me in anything I want to do or become. So, as you move forward in the next weeks, and specifically throughout this week before the Q&A, I invite you to take your observations into this space of awareness with love. Am I truly in a space of love? What do I want? Do I want love? Do I want pain? It's my choice. And that's an exciting, exciting thing to realize. And it's empowering. I remember being at a personal development event, and it was kind of behind the scenes at the home of the head guy. And we were, it was actually when I was helping facilitate, and we were learning how to properly facilitate a board break. I don't know if any of you have been to any seminars where they actually do the board break, and it's this big empowering thing where you can break a board and you're super strong and powerful, and you write your beliefs on your board and all of that stuff, right? And I was having a huge autoimmune flare-up at the time, and I was trying to break the board, and I was just sobbing in pain. I mean, I was in excruciating pain, and I was trying to be discreet about it, but apparently I wasn't doing a very good job, because the head facilitator kind of called me out in front of everyone, and he looked me in the face, and he got really close, and he's like, "Kara, it is all in your head." And it was like, old Kara would have, before then, that would have been so deeply, deeply traumatizing to hear that, because I had doctors after doctor after doctor tell me for years, well, we can't find anything wrong, so it must be all in your head. Like, you must be a hypochondriac. And so, like, he had no idea what he could have potentially triggered in me. But I think because I had already shifted into this space of wanting to be fully honest and transparent with what is, like, I had really grasped that and written that upon my heart about the importance of being fully honest, something clicked for the better. When he said that, I suddenly felt this huge weight. And again, I don't necessarily condone that anyone ever do that in a seminar and call someone out and humiliate them in front of everyone. I don't agree with, like, his approach. But it was really life-changing in that moment for me personally, because it was like something clicked, and I was like, oh, if it's in my head, then that means I'm in full control, that I'm in the driver's seat. And it was just this huge, like, all these years I thought I was totally at the mercy of my body. I was completely a prisoner to my body, because I didn't understand fully what was going on. And so I was in a lot of victimhood, and I was in a lot of belief of helplessness and hopelessness of, like, well, I guess this is how it's always going to be. And suddenly I felt free, and I felt empowered, and I felt in charge, because it was that honesty of, like, okay, that is actually the truth, and my spirit knew it was truth. And from that day forward, I started to really hone in on the beliefs that were in my head that were causing illness in my body. And as I began to shift that programming and change that programming, that's when my body began to heal. When I no longer believed that I had to choose suffering, that I could find peace and joy and fulfillment regardless of how my body was showing up for me, I was free. I was not in bondage to my body. And yeah, it was all in my head, because I could choose from this day forward how I perceived, how I believed about myself and my body moving forward, and that I could change my brain. And as a result, I could change my body. And I just believe that with all my heart. I was genuinely debilitatingly, is that even a word? Sick. I was suicidal. I have tried to end my own life on a couple of occasions and luckily was unsuccessful. Um, I truly believed that the world was better off without me. And um,
Thank you. Appreciate
so
it.
I know what it feels like to be in the darkest, deep dungeon of hell in the body, in the spirit, in the mind. And that it's possible to change that and to shift that in really powerful ways, and that hopefully you've learned through the last 6 weeks that it's simple. It's not complicated. It just takes time and consistency and love, right? Continually connecting to love. And that's my story. I'm sticking to it. I'm so grateful that you guys have been on this journey with me, and I would love, love, love support in if you find it in your hearts to write a testimonial about this particular experience. I would be so grateful that I could then use marketing this into the future. If you have any feedback on how I can make this better, one of the feedback will be a Facebook group, Melissa, that I'm already like, there has to be a Facebook group where people can continue to discuss with each other throughout the week. Any feedback on timing of when you think most people can attend this portion and the Q&A portion, I would appreciate any of that feedback. I would like to spend the rest of the time, just a few more minutes. If anyone has any questions or comments, we will take care of a lot of those in the Q&A. But if anyone wants to, let me check the chat and see if I've missed anyone. Okay, Diana, you still want the title of her book. Another book that I recommend is Byron Katie's A Return to Love. That's the main one that I want to recommend for today's topic, is A Return to Love by Byron Katie. Okay, there's no comments in there. Diana, did you want to share?
Would you put that in?
I can't hear you.
Would you put that in some notes?
Hold on.
Okay.
Hold on. Okay, go ahead.
Could you put that Byron Katie in your notes, or do you want me to just write? I can write it down.
Oh, I can put that on. I'll make a note of that to put that on the site.
Okay. And the only reason I said about Brene Brown is because you mentioned her a few times in this. Mm-hmm. And so I thought maybe she would be somebody good to read on.
Yeah, she's fantastic. And you know, Guru is actually kind of it's interesting. It's kind of a compilation. It's kind of been hitting me that it's so unique and that there's not really anything quite like it out there. And that's, I think, just because I've taken all the best parts that have totally changed my life from all the gurus that I've encountered throughout my life and kind of brought them together and then taken it to God and said, all right, teach me, how can I simplify this? How can I put this in just sort of a really simple format that anyone could access and use? And I have a lot more principles and skills that I addressed in the first round of Guru that I want to continue to teach. And so I'm playing with the idea. I'm not playing with it anymore. I'm going to do it. I just don't have all the details worked out. But I'm going to do what I'm calling a Guru Mastermind membership. So it's basically a subscription model where you can choose to pay a monthly fee, which is going to not be big at all. It's going to be small, and I'll have a live hour-and-a-half mastermind that's similar to our Q&As, but there will be a portion of it where there's content, and then we'll have a Q&A portion. So the content will probably be like 30 minutes, and then an hour of really hashing it out and going deep. Those will be recorded though, because I want, if someone can't attend and they're paying for the membership, I want them to go back and watch and learn from that. And so anyway, so that's happening, and would love to have you guys continue on with me because there's more that I didn't get to teach in these 6 weeks that wasn't meant to be in this core curriculum that will enhance and help you go deeper and wider with what you've learned so far. Um, yeah, so I'd love to have you join me, and I would love your friends to join as well. I'm going to start another round of Guru in the next couple weeks, and so if you guys don't mind, I'll send you the information. So if you have anyone that you think could benefit from it, um, and if you don't want me to send you that information, just say so, and I won't hurt my feelings at all because I don't want to spam anyone's inboxes. So um, I think that's all. Did anyone want to ask any more questions before we close?
I just wanted to say I loved it, especially today's. It just really helped
Good.
with everything. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. All right, love you guys. Oh, Conan's asking a question. Hold on. So that's a great question. I would like it to be. And so that's where I get to continue to think about like what does the cost get to be. It was $149 for brand new people taking it for this beta test round, and like I was mentioning to you guys at the Q&A on Friday, I was kind of picking these guys' brains that were on that mastermind Q&A, like how to kind of format this, what to charge. And so if you have any feedback on what you think it's worth, and I'm still kind of in between worlds. I spent so many years in the personal development world and the mindset of charge what you're worth, and I'm not there anymore, but now I'm kind of floundering a little bit of, okay, what what do I charge in order for it to be worth my time and for it to be still accessible for everybody? So I'm still working through that. I'm going to pray about it some more, but if you have any feedback, that would be great. Those of you that have taken this round, the price that you paid this time is forever. You can retake this at that same price as many times as you want. So that's always available to you guys, because I'm just grateful that you have been my guinea pigs, and hopefully I'll get better with each round, but I feel like I made a lot of mistakes the first round for all of you. And I love that some of you stuck with me for the second round. So all right, well, we'll see you guys Friday, unless anyone has any other questions or comments, and 7 p.m. Oh, thank you, Valerie. I appreciate that. I'm glad you liked it. I think that a lot of people maybe felt a little fire hosed with the first round because I was trying to put I was getting so much inspiration, and it was just like, ooh, and I thought, well, we'll just do it this way and we'll just get it all out. And then I can that's how I learn. I learn best by doing. And so that God knows that. So he's like, all right, just here you go each week. This is what we're doing. And now looking in hindsight, I was able to actually pull 3 different programs from that original beta test, which is cool. So, all right, I love you guys, and we'll see you Friday. Take care.